After 28 years, Florence Griffith Joyner's death is finally solved, and it's bad for millions of sports fans around the world. The name Florence Griffith Joyner was more than just a famous athlete. She was a symbol of speed, confidence, and greatness. People knew her as Flo-Jo, the woman whose incredible performances on the track had amazed the entire world. Her bright outfits, long colorful nails, and powerful running style made her one of the most unforgettable athletes in sports history. But one quiet morning, a shocking piece of news spread across television screens and newspapers that left fans confused and heartbroken. It was early in the morning when emergency services were called to her home in California. According to the first reports, Florence had been found unresponsive in her bedroom while she was sleeping. Her family was terrified and rushed to get help, hoping that somehow it was just a misunderstanding. But when medical workers arrived, the situation quickly became clear. The legendary sprinter who once outran the fastest women in the world was suddenly gone. She was only 38 years old, and the news shocked everyone who heard it. Within hours, the story spread across the country and then across the world. Sports networks interrupted their regular programming to report the tragedy. Fans could not believe that someone who once looked so strong and full of life had died so suddenly. Many people remembered watching her break records and dominate races with unbelievable speed. To them, she seemed almost unstoppable. That is why the news felt so confusing. How could someone so powerful disappear so suddenly? In the first few days after her death, officials tried to calm the public by explaining that her passing appeared to be natural. Early reports suggested that she may have suffered a medical emergency during her sleep. There were no signs of violence, no signs of an accident, and nothing that immediately suggested something suspicious. Because of this, authorities began their investigation quietly, while the world mourned the loss of one of the most famous athletes of her generation. Long before the mystery surrounding her death began, Florence Griffith Joyner had already become one of the most unforgettable names in the history of track and field. Fans around the world did not just admire her because she won races, they admired her because of the way she changed the image of what an athlete could look like. She brought style, confidence, and personality to a sport that many people once considered simple and quiet. When Florence stepped onto the track, everyone noticed. Her bright racing suits, long decorated nails, and unique hairstyles made her stand out instantly. But behind that glamorous image was an athlete who had spent years working harder than almost anyone else. Florence's journey to fame was not easy. She grew up in a modest neighborhood where opportunities were limited, but from a young age she discovered something special about her ability to run. Coaches quickly noticed that she had natural speed, but they also saw something even more important. She had determination. While other young athletes sometimes lost focus, Florence continued to train harder every year. Running became more than just a sport for her. It became a dream and a path toward a different life. As she moved into college athletics, her reputation slowly started to grow. Coaches began to realize that Florence was not just talented, she was exceptional. She pushed her body during training sessions, waking up early, practicing for hours, and constantly trying to improve her times. Those years of discipline slowly turned her into one of the fastest women in the country. But fame did not arrive overnight. She had to fight through many competitions before the world truly noticed her. Everything changed when she began competing on the biggest international stages. Suddenly, millions of viewers were watching her races. What they saw amazed them. Florence did not just win races, she dominated them with a level of speed that seemed almost unbelievable. Her running style looked smooth and powerful at the same time, almost as if she was floating across the track while other runners struggled to keep up. After the sudden passing of Florence Griffith Joyner, the world waited for answers. Fans, reporters, and the entire sports community wanted to understand what had really happened to the legendary sprinter. In the days following her death, investigators and medical experts began examining the situation carefully. Since she had been found in her bedroom with no signs of struggle or injury, authorities initially believed that her passing was caused by a medical issue that occurred while she was asleep. A few weeks later, the official explanation was finally released to the public. Medical examiners announced that Florence had suffered an epileptic seizure during the night. According to their report, the seizure had likely caused a sudden breathing problem while she was sleeping, which ultimately led to her death. The report stated that she had previously experienced seizures earlier in her life, although many people outside her close circle were not aware of this health condition. Because of this medical history, investigators concluded that her death was the result of natural causes. At first, many people accepted the explanation. News channels reported the findings, newspapers published the official statements, and the case seemed to be moving toward a quiet conclusion. Her family asked for privacy during a very painful time, and most fans simply focused on remembering her incredible achievements, rather than questioning the details of her passing. However, as time passed, some individuals began to feel that the explanation raised more questions than it answered. For many people, it was difficult to understand how a world-class athlete who had appeared strong and energetic could suddenly die in her sleep at such a young age. Florence had retired from professional competition years earlier, but she still appeared active and healthy whenever she attended public events or spoke to the media. Sports analysts and journalists also noticed something unusual. The investigation had moved quickly, and very little detailed information was shared with the public. While the official report explained the cause of death, it did not fully explore whether other health factors might have been involved. Some observers wondered if there were medical details that had simply never been discussed publicly. Another reason people remained curious was Florence's incredible physical history. As one of the fastest sprinters the world had ever seen, she had pushed her body to extreme levels during training and competition. Elite athletes often place enormous pressure on their bodies for many years. Because of this, some experts quietly questioned whether her long athletic career could have played a role in hidden health problems that had never been fully explained. Still, the case was eventually closed. Authorities had no evidence of foul play, and the medical report gave a clear technical explanation. For officials, there was no reason to continue investigating further. Life moved on. The sports world returned to its normal rhythm, and Florence's name slowly began to appear less frequently in daily headlines. But the story was far from finished. Even though the case had been officially closed, a feeling of uncertainty remained among some fans and journalists. Small questions continued to circulate quietly over the years. Some people believed the official report might only tell part of the story. Others wondered if important details had been overlooked or misunderstood. For nearly 3 decades, those questions remained in the background, waiting for someone who was willing to take a closer look at the past. And eventually, many years later, that is exactly what someone decided to do. Some claimed that Florence had been under enormous stress in the years leading up to her death. While she appeared glamorous and confident in public, behind closed doors she might have been dealing with pressures that no one fully understood. Others pointed to her intense training history, suggesting that years of pushing her body to the limit could have left hidden scars on her health. Although no one could confirm these rumors, they refused to disappear. Online forums, sports documentaries, and magazine articles kept bringing them back into discussion, fueling curiosity and debate among fans. There were also whispers about things that had never been publicly disclosed. Friends and former colleagues spoke in hushed tones about medical conditions that were kept private, about sleepless nights, and about the relentless drive that had made Florence a world-class athlete, but may also have taken a toll on her well-being. Even some journalists hinted that the investigation into her death had been completed quickly, almost as if authorities wanted to move the story off the headlines. These suspicions only added to the sense of mystery, leaving many people feeling that the official explanation was incomplete. Over the years, the rumors became part of Florence's legacy. Fans remembered her for her incredible speed and her unforgettable personality. But they also wondered what secrets had been hidden behind the public image. It was a quiet, unresolved story, one that kept resurfacing whenever her life or achievements were discussed. And for nearly 3 decades, nobody had the courage or resources to dig deeper and uncover the truth that lay buried beneath decades of speculation. Then, 28 years after her death, someone finally decided to take another look. A journalist with a reputation for deep investigation began re-examining old files, interviews, and medical records. This decision would eventually lead to discoveries that not only confirmed some long-held suspicions, but also revealed truths that shocked even those who thought they knew the whole story about Florence Griffith Joyner. 28 years after the sudden death of Florence Griffith Joyner, the world thought it had finally accepted the official explanation. a seizure during sleep. But for one investigative journalist, the story didn't sit right. She had spent years covering unsolved mysteries and overlooked details, and something about Florence's death seemed unfinished. What had appeared to be a simple medical case now felt like a puzzle hiding decades-old secrets. The journalist began her work by digging into public records and archived reports from the original investigation. She noticed that while the official files mentioned a seizure, they offered very few details about Florence's health leading up to her death. Witness statements were brief, medical notes were sparse, and many people who had known Florence were never interviewed. Something about the speed at which the investigation had concluded struck her as unusual. To her, the case deserved a closer look. Next, she reached out to individuals who had been close to Florence: friends, former coaches, and training partners. Many were hesitant at first. They remembered how intensely private Florence had been about her personal struggles. But slowly, some agreed to speak. Their stories were striking. They described a woman who, behind the scenes, had endured high levels of stress, long-term fatigue from years of training, and medical issues that had never been publicly discussed. Although these accounts were never meant to make headlines, they offered a glimpse into a reality that contrasted sharply with her public persona of glamour and invincibility. The journalist also found archived photographs, videos, and interviews that no one had analyzed closely before. Small details, the way Florence sometimes paused mid-conversation, or subtle mentions of feeling unwell, started forming a pattern. Combined with old medical notes that had been buried in filing cabinets, a picture began to emerge of a woman silently struggling with her health while carrying the weight of public expectation. As she pieced together this information, the journalist realized something profound. Florence's death was far more complex than anyone had imagined. The official cause, a seizure, was accurate in a technical sense, but it didn't tell the full story. There were multiple factors, some hidden for decades, that had quietly contributed to her untimely passing. It wasn't a scandal, and there was no foul play, but it was a truth far deeper and more tragic than the public had ever known. By reopening the mystery, the journalist not only shed light on Florence's hidden struggles, but also began to change the narrative surrounding her life and death. For decades, fans had remembered Florence only for her speed and style. Now, they would also come to understand the silent battles she had faced, the pressures that accompanied her fame, and the complexity of a life that ended far too soon. As the journalist dug deeper, a more intimate and human side of Florence Griffith Joyner began to emerge, one that the world had never seen. While fans remembered her as the unstoppable Flo-Jo, few knew that behind the bright smile and dazzling public image, she had quietly struggled with her health. The documents and interviews revealed that Florence had been dealing with several medical issues in the years leading up to her death, conditions she kept private to maintain her image as a strong, independent icon. Friends described how Florence sometimes felt exhausted, even after sleeping. She had a tendency to push herself far beyond what her body could handle, a habit developed during her years of intense training and competition. Years of sprinting at the highest level had placed extraordinary strain on her heart, muscles, and nervous system. While she continued to appear energetic at public events, privately she would occasionally suffer from dizziness, shortness of breath, and moments of weakness that concerned those closest to her. Alongside physical struggles, Florence also carried emotional burdens. The pressure of being a global icon, maintaining her fame, and inspiring millions, while coping with personal challenges, weighed heavily on her. According to friends, she rarely spoke about these struggles openly. She didn't want people to see her as weak, and she feared that revealing too much about her health could overshadow the legacy she had worked so hard to build. In this way, she carried a double life, one of public admiration and one of private endurance. Medical records obtained by the journalist indicated that some of these health issues had been treated quietly over the years, but none were ever discussed in detail in public. Small incidents, such as brief hospital visits or consultations with specialists, were documented but kept confidential. When combined with the stress and physical strain of her career, these hidden struggles created a delicate balance in her body, a balance that could unexpectedly falter. The journalist realized that this combination of physical and emotional challenges had likely played a significant role in Florence's untimely death. The seizure, as reported officially, had been the immediate cause. but it was not the full explanation. Years of silent health struggles, compounded by the demands of fame and the lingering effects of intense athletic training, had quietly created a scenario that made her sudden passing tragically possible. In revealing these hidden struggles, the journalist painted a picture of Florence not just as a record-breaking athlete, but as a human being who endured more than anyone knew. Her life was extraordinary, yes, but it was also fragile, an extraordinary mix of triumph and vulnerability that made the story of her final years both tragic and profoundly human.